I'd tell you the details, but it'd sound like I made them up.
Your problem is you spent your whole life thinking there are rules. There aren't.
Believing as I do, like the good Dr. King said, a man should be judged on the content of his character, not the color of his skin.
Yeah, he's dead. You're gonna need a different quote.
I just charged for parking.
You think they're going to ask questions when they come with their pitchforks and their torches?
It's just a flying saucer. We gotta go.
Haven't had a piece of pie like that since the Garden of Eden.
Simply deliver a message when the time comes.
Message? To who?
To the wicked.
We're very friendly people.
No, that's not it. Pretty unfriendly, actually.
Hello everybody and welcome to Very Friendly People. This is a Fargo character breakdown podcast. I am Thomas Potts and with me is...
Jack Breedon.
And we are two massive fans of the FXs Fargo TV series, and I have seen, or rather I've listened to a lot of different Fargo podcasts over the years that are often episode breakdowns, and I thought, well, why don't we do something where we every episode break down a specific character from the series, because I think it's fair to say that the characters pretty much make the show.
Oh yeah, entirely a character-driven experience, I think, more than anything else. Certainly not a... Well, we'll go into this anyway, my thoughts on sort of film noir and mystery and kind of how Fargo approaches that kind of evolving narrative through characters more than, oh, this is revealed and this is uncovered and who's going to react to this, because certain elements appear in the show seemingly out of nowhere, seemingly nonsensical, but they play a massive part in the story, more so I think than any other show, I would say.
Quite possibly, yeah. It's very much its own sort of animal. I think that season one is a bit more sort of familiar ground. It's kind of coming off the back of your Breaking Bads and your True Detectives, and it's in later seasons where, even though there are little flickers of something that's a bit more quirky and a bit more bizarre, that the later seasons really kind of take that and run with it.
Yeah. I think to start off with, I think we need to kind of discuss what the hell is a Fargo?
Yes.
You know.
So, obviously, Fargo is based on the movie by the Coen brothers, which is actually not set in the town of Fargo. I think the beginning scene is set in Fargo, and then the rest of the film takes place in... Oh, where is it again?
It's in... Is it... Oh, I'm trying to think now, because Bemidji is in the TV show.
It's not Duluth, is it?
Duluth. And Brainerd and Duluth.
Brainerd and Duluth, that is right, yes. And so, very successful film, bit of a cult classic of just this quirky little crime caper with a big dose of dark humor, all set in this cute little Midwestern town with the cute little Midwestern accents. And you betcha. Yeah. And it was such a very unique film, I think, particularly with regards to its kind of approach to the character of the detective, and having this character who is a pregnant,
well-meaning, well-mannered, friendly, chipper, small,
not dumb.
Cop. Not dumb. Exactly. Which a lot of... Yeah, because that's kind of the stereotype, isn't it? You kind of have the hick, bumbling cop, which you do get in the show with a few characters, but with Marge in the film, you kind of expect a gritty, nihilistic, whiskey drinking, cigar smoking in a dark room. Yeah, exactly. And here comes, Marge. Frances McDormand wins the bloody Oscar for it. Well deserved, I should say. Well deserved.
Very much so, yes. No, she does really well. But what's really interesting about the television shows, because we've seen quite a lot of this now, of sort of people taking movies and turning them into TV shows. And what they usually do is they will literally just take the movie, flesh it out a bit and put it on the small screen. Whereas the approach that showrunner Noah Hawley did with this FX show was that he basically created his own story while borrowing certain archetypes that were set up from the Fargo movie, but also dove into the rest of the Coen brothers' filmography in order to make his own TV show, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, because it's not only, I suppose, there was I think I remember this back when the show first aired. There was a lot of debate of people like, oh, is it a total remake? Is it the same as the film? Is it going to be something entirely different? Because obviously there was another planned Fargo TV show.
It was, yes.
A pilot is currently on YouTube.
Following the adventures of Marge, basically. And it was going to be more of a sort of villain of the week mystery show where Marge has to try and... almost kind of like Columbo, really.
Yeah.
It was basically Columbo set in the world of Fargo with Tony Soprano's wife playing the role of Marge.
Yes, Eddie Falco.
Yes.
Yeah, Camilla and Nurse Jackie, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's clearly like been a thing that people have wanted to do for a while, and it's almost as if they've had to wait for television to kind of catch up to what they would be able to do. And what I absolutely love about this show is that, as I've said already, it not only is an adaptation of the film, it is a celebration of the entire Coen brothers filmography, but even goes further than that and becomes its own animal, and it becomes this huge sprawling American mythology. I decided a long time ago Fargo would be my Star Wars. This is the realm that I want to kind of absorb. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, as a Star Wars uber fan since birth, my dad is also a Star Wars nerd. I do understand that that's a weighty claim, but I respect it, and I think I'd agree. I think I'd happily jump on that ship. Sinking or otherwise.
Plus, it's easier to absorb all of Fargo than it is to absorb all of Star Wars.
Because every character in Star Wars has a novel about them, has a name, has a costume, has a history. Every background alien, every recycled costume is another character.
Yes.
But Fargo, Fargo has amazing names, of course, for every character, but it doesn't have Droopy McCool.
Fair enough. It does not have Droopy McCool.
He is a real Star Wars character in Return of the Jedi. Max Rebo's band. He plays the clarinet.
But I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the names in Fargo were so evocative, and it almost kind of reminds me of like Charles Dickens, when he'll say a character's name, and it's like I immediately know who this character is just from hearing the name.
Scrooge is. You absolutely can picture his face and his nature and his mentality and his history all through just language.
Absolutely, yeah.
Two words, and you've got a character like Carol. I'm jealous, undoubtedly jealous of that skill.
It is a knack. And speaking of words as well, Noah Hawley managed to take this kind of Minnesota nice cadence and way of speaking that was created in the, it's obviously a heightened version that's made for the movie, and he turns it into the almost sort of Shakespearean style poetry, because there are some beautiful monologues and beautiful bits of verbal slapstick that happen throughout the show, which are just absolutely incredible. Like, as much as like there's great visual spectacle, I think it's the dialogue and the interplay between these characters that we're going to be discussing that really fuels the fire of what an amazing and multi-layered show this is.
Well, those things perfectly in my mind show off genre and blend of genre, which really I suppose complements what I think the meaning of the show is, because Joel and Ethan Coen making Fargo, which is their 6th film after Hudsucker Proxy, I think it is.
Yes, I believe so.
At the time, a commercial flop. It really didn't do well. And Fargo,
I watched it for the first time recently, and it was. It wasn't one of their best, but you can enjoy it for the kind of weird Looney Tune movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and Noah Hawley, I think, picked their style of complementing humor and drama and horror. I think because I think it was Joel Cohen who, little trivia fact for you, was an associate editor on The Evil Dead with Sam Raimi. Who,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Sam Raimi, of course, has horror and comedy. You know, he's the master. I think he might be one of the masters of horror.
Absolutely.
That group. Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness, of course, has loads of slapstick, which involves ripping off of limbs and undead ghouls possessing women, and faces melting, and then eyeball flying into a woman's mouth. And so the Coens have certainly become kind of an arbiter for that blend with their stuff. Fargo in particular, Burn After Reading, and then sort of the more serious stuff,
No Country
for Old Men. I mean, Anton Chigurh is a straight slasher villain. He's Jason Voorhees meets the Terminator.
Yes,
he has his look, his haircut, and his overalls. He has his choice weapon. Freddy Krueger has his glove, Voorhees has his machete, and he has his silent shotgun and air canister.
Yes, absolutely.
But
he's kind of one of the archetypes that the Coens usually come into, which is the unstoppable evil force.
Yeah, which we'll definitely be talking about. We'll have a lot of episodes in this show about Lord Malvo, of course, and Varga, and all the others who sort of creep up now and then in this show.
Yes, because it's interesting, the kind of dichotomy that tends to come to the centerfold for every season. And one of the great things is every season is its own self-contained story, and yet they all intersect and connect and speak to this wider universe. But practically every time they'll set up these archetypes. Sometimes they'll put a bit of a spin on them, sometimes they'll completely turn to a completely different direction. When you think it's going down a certain direction, it always keeps you guessing like that. And I've completely lost my point now, but it's great. It's a great show.
Yeah, we're going to ramble on this show, and I think tough. You just have to stick with it. Exactly, it truly is. We do have an immense love for this show, and
I think I watched the first 3 seasons like 5 times, I believe.
I mean, almost every day I watch a scene on YouTube just on my phone.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Good. Thank God I'm not alone on that. What was the one today? Oh, the tornado, which.
Yes, because you've just finished season 4, haven't you?
Just finished season 4.
This was really But what was so interesting is that obviously, like, when all this craziness started happening, and I knew that season 4 had been delayed indefinitely, and I was like, I need it now. And so I went back and I rewatched all of the seasons of Fargo, but I watched them in chronological order rather than.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I watched season 2, then season 1, then season 3.
Season 3, yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously it doesn't make sense because season 4, takes place before any of them. But it made sense at the time, and but like thinking about it more and more, it's a miracle that series ever happened, because they filmed the last 2 episodes in the midst of COVID, basically.
Yeah. Just for I don't know, future listeners, if that ever happens. This is currently being recorded in January of 2021, so still possibly halfway, possibly close to the end. You'll know, but we don't.
This is basically somewhere between a podcast and just a means of staying sane, really.
Yes. A desperate attempt of clutching at the shreds of humanity and sanity as we're locked in our digital cells.
Yes.
Wow, that was depressing.
That's the thing as well. Like, as you know, a lot of people who may not have actually seen the show, although I don't know why you'd be listening to this podcast if you haven't.
Yes, it doesn't have to be said. Spoilers. My God, there's going to be
so many spoilers. So many spoilers.
You have to watch this entire show. So much context will be just so foreign to you if you don't.
There will be spoilers for things that may not actually have happened in the show, but we think might have happened. Like, that's the thing.
and probably for most Coen movies as well. There's a lot of homages in this show.
Absolutely. Yes.
So-
but after talking about like this show of being like elements of crime and horror and all this stuff, the show has such and comedy, dark comedy, but there is such a genuine warmth to it as well, which is, I think, really sets it apart from like a lot of other kind of black comedies. And to be perfectly honest, quite a few Coen Brothers movies who tend to have a bit of a nihilistic view to their films, whereas I think that the TV show might have just a little bit more sense of hope, and which I think kind of
which is character driven. I think
it's character driven. Yes,
it's this optimism, this really chipper nature that a lot of the characters in Fargo, which is the stereotype of someone from Fargo, I think is this unending, unwavering sense of, in the end, things may be bad now, but in the end, things will be all right. Things will make sense. And
smiling at the void.
Smiling at the void, exactly. The end comes for us all, so we might as well enjoy the ride.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's also really interesting, like, because I mean, the show actually deals a lot with religion as well, which is something that Noah Hawley has expressed an interest in always talking about. As a man of faith myself, it's really interesting to be able to see that layer to it as well. There's a lot of references to Christianity, but also like Judaism and Scientology, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, or just fables in general as well. Aesop's fables and parables about good versus evil.
Fairy tales.
Oh yeah, a lot of fantasy elements. Wizard of Oz, especially in season 4, of course.
Yes.
Yeah,
which is interesting because the Coen brothers once said every movie they tried to make, they were essentially just trying to remake The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay, I didn't actually know that. Oh, even I'm learning something. Yeah, and as someone who's as an atheist, I suppose, this show, I've still got a massive interest, a real keen sort of academic.
Like you're interested in studying religion, basically.
Yeah. In understanding where these stories, where these legends, where these lessons sort of originated from, and what they mean, and how they can still be applied to modern day as they did, back in ancient times. And I hope that in this podcast we'll have good discussions with ourselves, because we're obviously having two fairly, I suppose, not conflicting viewpoints, but two sides of a coin of what we think about the world. I like to think of it story-wise that we both, because we're both very similar in a lot of ways. We both like a lot of the similar stuff, and the same outlook on things, same politics, the same viewpoints, the same understanding about stuff. And in terms of story, I think we both very much agree on the middle, but we disagree entirely on how it begins and ends.
Very good way of looking at it, yeah. I guess we want to, and also like we also want to promote kind of the title of the series is Very Friendly People, so let's try and be very friendly people ourselves.
I think the point of why I think you chose the title of this. I think the point of this quote, it kind of shows. God, I'm going to be very, very academic. I'm going to put on my philosopher's hat here.
Oh, okay. Oh, what's going on, guys?
But what the characters reflect in the modern life, how we relate to these characters. Obviously, Very Friendly People is a quote from Mike Milligan and Lou Saltz,
who says it, yeah.
Their dialogue in which he says that we're very friendly people, and Mike Milligan very much disagrees with that fact. And it's that kind of strange paradox, I think, on which we can be two opposite things at the same time, if that makes sense. Like you and I, we disagree on how the universe was constructed, but but we both agree on what it is now. And how can you both agree on a made thing if you both have entirely different ideologies on how that thing was made? And yet we do. And the character, he says we're very friendly people, but it's they're very unfriendly.
Pretty unfriendly, actually.
It's that strange paradox of how can they be both at the same time? How can, if we're going through characters, how can Lester Nygaard be a well-meaning, trodden-on husband in a, I say, abusive, kind of emotionally abusive relationship?
Yeah, I was wondering that as well. Yeah,
how can he be this, and then also this underlying Walter White, Tony Soprano-esque sociopath?
How can you be victim and villain at the same time?
Exactly. How can you be sympathetic and yet so totally, undeniably evil acts are done through this sympathetic lens? How can you relate to Mike Milligan and fall in love with Mike Milligan, as I know you do, as I know I do, and yet go, yeah, but he's the bad guy? How can I relate to him? How is looking at his origin story in season 4, looking at him as a kid and seeing how he was raised, how does that make everything justified? Does it make everything justified? How can we live with these paradoxes? How can we understand seemingly nonsense? How can an alien cause a crime boss, the younger brother in a crime family, to die in a car crash? How can that then cause, Peggy and her husband to become wanted criminals? How can all this happen? How can they choose this? Why did the aliens do this? Why don't we have an answer? And I think the point of this isn't to make, it is to make sense, but it's not to have a concrete answer.
It poses questions more than anything else. It poses
questions, yeah. And I think you just have to take away with your own understanding and listening to other people's understanding. I know we've discussed a whole lot about TV shows and about other stuff in general in the past, I think, in which I've taken something away and I go, wow, I view this quite differently, I think. Or you say something and I go, actually, that's kind of concrete. That's kind of reinforced my ideas more so, perhaps. And I think Fargo does a fabulous job of doing this without being pretentious, without being, that kind of people staring out to the night sky and going, oh, why are we? Why are this? What's it all about? It's just people in the snow being friendly to each other, all understanding, yep, I don't know why this has happened. What I do know is that it's cold. Let's get warm. I went on a massive tangent there, and I do.
That was beautiful, man. That was good.
Well, thank you. I hope I was clutching at straws halfway through, but I think right at the end, I niggled a little.
You saved it.
A little fish. I saved that. Yeah.
But speaking of questions being posed, I have a question for you, Jack.
Shoot.
So, if you had to rank each season in order of personal preference, what would your ranking be?
I think without a doubt, my favourite and least favourite are unwavering. I think always, well, maybe not always will be. We'll always see what happens with season 5. It may be the greatest piece of television or, utter garbage. It won't.
Somewhere in between.
It never won't. Yeah. So number 4 out of 4, I think, is season 4. I think you might agree on this.
I would, yes.
Yeah, it's wonderfully shot. It's beautiful. The soundtrack is superb. The characters and the acting is next level. It's truly something to watch, and so
just the premise as well is so unique, and also fair play to the show for having a lot of prominent black actors as well, which none of the other seasons really had, with the exception of course, Mike Milligan in season 2.
Yep. And having them not all be the same type of character, having them all serve different roles within the show, within the world, having no stereotypes, having both heroes and villains, both sympathetic and some of them do certain acts that you go, oh god, that's pretty villainous. I'm not sure if I can relate to that. And it's, you know, at the height of, you know, the whole Trump thing and the way that the world is now. I think that does take major balls to have that on a TV show.
That's the thing. It's usually a very sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say it. Sorry.
No,
like it often does comment on not only the time that we're living in when the show is made, but also the times in which the show is set, because obviously it's set in different periods throughout history.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. I don't want to, you know, kind of seem pretentious here, but but I will. So
that's the whole reason for this podcast, Jack. Come on.
That is to stroke my massive ego. I have to put this drama degree to some use. It's just sitting there doing nothing.
No, Jack, we need to retrain. Remember, like the ballerina in the advert.
Of course, yes, working cyber, like some sort of Doctor Who episode in which the Cybermen create a job centre.
I would watch that episode, to be fair.
I actually, that's quite good. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not even gonna lie. That's quite a good concept. You go in and you come out. Yeah. Anyway, the point being is that art as a whole obviously has to be entertaining, of course, but it does reflect the world. It reflects the world in which it was made. You see that in a lot of nostalgic shows now are made by, you know, people who grew up in the 80s, and so there's a hell of a lot of 80s, you know, Wonder Woman 1984, Stranger Things, big neon, big 80s pop music, and the fashion all happening in the show. And then you watch movies in the 80s, and they're all nostalgic about growing up in the 50s.
And there's even that idea of, you know, the sort of American Northwest almost being just slightly behind the times, no matter what time period they're in.
Yeah, slightly isolated from the rest of the world, its own kind of little petri dish of growing things that bubble out of proportion for a lot of well-meaning and some unwell-meaning characters.
Yes. So 4's fourth.
Yes, so 4 is fourth. I loved it. I think if it was any other show, it would be one of the best seasons of that show. But it was missing something that all the other seasons had. A lot of interconnectivity was missing. I think there was a lot of great characters, but I don't think all of them were utilized enough.
Yep.
A lot of their deaths were good, but they just missed an impact, I think, that a lot of other characters in other seasons got. And also all the other seasons have a mystery throughout. You know, like the Coens, they love a sort of film noir-esque kind of unraveling narrative of this character has a secret and all the others are this close to figuring it out. Or in season 1, some of them have figured out, but other characters are stopping them from doing anything about it because they figured out something entirely different. And unlike other detective shows, which are like, we've gathered this evidence, he's my main suspect. Oh no, but he's died, so that means that there must be someone else. You're the surprise reveal. With this show, it's all, you're fully aware of the mystery, and it's all just that whistling kettle of it's bubbling up, you can hear it constantly, and at one point it's going to burst if someone doesn't do something about it. And a lot of the time,
it's basically Columbo, but you know that Columbo's always going to get it right. We don't necessarily know that in the world of Fargo.
And like real life, you know, it's why the film starts with "This is a true story," because of course that's a load of bollocks. It's not a true story. It's an entirely fabricated thing. Although the film was based upon someone being in a wood chipper in a news story, but that's
and throughout the season there are like references to true life events, or you know, at least, you know, the things that people claim are true. You know?
Yeah, the
tornado, even the UFO in season 2. That was a first-hand eyewitness account.
Absolutely. But the true story motif isn't to say what is happening within the story is true. It's just the entire thing is fictional, but it says something that is true. It allows
it's a story in the style of a true story movie. Almost.
It allows you to believe totally outlandish things, because outlandish things happen in real life every day. I mean, we live in 2021.
Truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah.
Well, truth is stranger than fiction. 2020 is by far, obviously, I've only lived 22 years, so I can't speak for all the rest. Certainly the strangest year of my life. And I've spoken to people, far, much older, and they said, yeah, 2020, it's just plot twist after plot twist. But you go, well, it's real life. There's no plot. It's just things happen. Things come out of nowhere. Accidents can occur. And when they do in this show, it feels on brand rather than, when an alien shows up at the end of season 2. If that happened in any other really strict narrative-based crime show, you'd go, wow, these writers really lost the plot. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Aliens end up at the end of the episode. Woof. But in this, it's like, yeah, I know people who've seen aliens. I know loads of my family of ghost stories or have had visions, which is even a stranger concept. And this is coming from an atheist, a realist, a somewhat positive nihilist in terms of how the world works and how chemicals in our brain make this and that, and psychology and laws of physics and blah 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 blah. And I respect, and all my families are skeptics, yet they felt something. They felt fear when they had an out-of-body experience. They felt reflective when they had a vision. They felt wonder and amazement when they thought they saw an alien or a ghost in the window, or something spooky occurred, or they had a dream foretelling an event that would happen the next week. My mum is constantly claiming she's a psychic. Same with my sister. She's big into Buddhism and spirituality and that kind of thing, but she's not religious at all. But she claims that, certain things will happen and then suddenly a phone call will happen confirming this, And if you had that, and to have this put in a TV show, if certain weird, fantastical elements like that were to occur, you'd go, oh, this is a bit weird. The atmosphere doesn't quite blend. It doesn't quite work with having these elements in it that seem so gritty and real. But with Fargo, it's just this is a true story.
You can't argue
weird
with it.
Can happen, does happen, and you can't. It just is. You can't argue with it. I'm not going to say that they didn't see that, because they saw it. They're not lying to me. They may not believe it, but they did see it, and that's why I think I love this show.
Cool. Yeah.
We were ranking a list, weren't we?
Yeah. So you got to the first one.
We got a quarter of the way there, and I talked about anyway.
Okay, keep going. No, this is good. This is good.
So season 4 is number 4. And then I think I'm going to be strung up for this, I think. But season 1 is my 3rd place. And I'm not sure if you'd agree or not.
I would agree, actually, yeah.
Oh, would you? Okay, good. Oh, phew. All right, okay. So we'll die side by side at the gallows. That's fine.
I think my thing with...
It's
superb. I mean, we're basically doing our list just kind of parallel to each other now, so... I was going to say that, like, the thing with season 1 is, like, I love it. And to be honest, like, I almost feel like it's a version of the movie that I almost kind of prefer, because it's able to be just a little bit more weird and a bit more fleshed out, because obviously it's a lot longer. You can spend more time with the characters and really getting to know them. But at the same time, I think a lot of the other seasons were able to go in directions that are so different. They weren't as tied to the original source material and had a bit more kind of flexibility to them.
Yeah, there's certainly a limitation with season 1. Well, not a limitation, but there was a weight to it. I think when they must have had pressure in making the show, coming off the heels of an award-winning cult film.
Like, this show should not exist, is the thing.
No, it should.
There's no way that this show should ever have been made.
Yeah, it should have been either a failure or just no one thought the script was any good. They should have just thrown it away and gone, it can't be done. You can't do it. The film's been made. Just leave it at that. But it's a miracle. You know, the weird does happen. This is a true story. And by whoever's grace, it managed to be made. But yeah, with season 1, it's certainly tethered to the first film. It's a spiritual sequel in the fact that you have Jerry Lundegaard is Lester Nygaard, Marge is Molly, you know, whilst also being a secret sequel, which you only find out. I can't remember which episode it is. It's quite a way in, though, that the supermarket king reveals, oh, he found the briefcase that Steve Buscemi.
Because that's one of the main divergence, like from like what you think is kind of the main plot, and you're like, why are we spending time here now? And then you're like, oh, right.
That's the tether to that. Oh wow, it's all interconnected. And I think that helps with reinforcing the whole structure of this interweaving narrative. I think by having that kind of quite meta interweaving aspect of, oh, it's also tied to the movie. So the movie happened. Oh wow, okay. And so all the weirdness of that, all the grittiness and all the humor of that is now moved over to this. And so if you love the film, you're now going to love the show even more, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, as a first season of a show, I think it's perfect. It built the base that seasons 2, 3, and 4 could then spring off of in all different directions and grow upon it. You have to have strong foundations, I think, to build something upon within a TV show, especially. And season 1 is as perfect as a foundation as you can, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's Shakespearean. It's gut-bustingly hilarious.
Yes.
It's spiritual without being exclusive. And in that way, I kind of mean, you know, it touches upon or has motifs or ideas or metaphors that feed into religion and spirituality and fables and stories that everyone, I think, can relate to, even if they don't like a certain character or like another one that someone else hates, or, you know, they all find something that they can find themselves in.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, obviously that's where they first struck this kind of incredible balancing act between the kind of real and the kind of surreal. It's almost between like a documentary and like a comic book world.
The strange blend.
Absolutely, yeah.
When we move to,
I feel like this is where we kind of diverge a bit.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Second place for me is season 2. And by that, I assume you mean your second place is season 3.
That's correct, yes.
Season 2 for me is better than season 1 in terms of it's just more of what I love, and expands it, I think. With season 1, there's a lot of archetypes that kind of stick quite closely to their archetypes. Lorne Malvo being a perfect villain, you know, outside evil, weaseling his way in and spreading his evil. Is that Lester Nygaard is meager and grows up into this outrageous villain character. Molly is this well-meaning, always ahead of the game, always knowing the truth while everyone else around her is doubting her. And with season 2, we get those types of characters, but with another shade thrown in. With Mike Milligan, you're like, oh, he's this tough gangster enforcer character, but why is he speaking? Why is he quoting these weird?
Why does he recite the entirety of the Jabberwocky?
Exactly. Why? Why? I think is a good question for any TV show to ask of an audience. And season 2 does that more so than season 1.
Season 2 is the one that's most concerned with this idea of obviously I'm breaking into my number 1 spot now, of like surrealism and absurdity, which, you know, as as a believer, I can't ascribe to as a philosophy, but I find infinitely fascinating.
Mm.
And like, I'm so close to kind of believing it myself.
Okay.
There are books of the Bible that I've read that like have a lot of ideas that you can kind of ascribe to Albert Camus, particularly like in things like the Book of Job and stuff like that. Of like, just sometimes things happen.
And there's nothing you can do about it. There's no control over that. You just have
Exactly,
to
yeah.
play the cards you dealt with.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one reason why I love season 2. And like you say, it's bigger than season 1, and yet it never falters. Everything is able to be tied together, but not in a very overly cutesy way. It still leaves just enough dangling threads to make you think about what could possibly happen next and some of the mysteries which are still left unanswered, but it's still satisfying. It's satisfying and yet unsatisfying at the same time.
If your show can pull off the inclusion of aliens out of nowhere and stick the landing, you've got a masterpiece on your hand.
Amen. Yes.
Absolutely. American Horror Story season 2 featured aliens, and that, in my opinion, is the best season of that show. And I think there's the
aliens just make everything better.
Aliens just make everything better. So good. The giant hovering UFO, and you never see them as well, which also adds to that mystery. You know that aliens are there.
The lightest sprinkling of sci-fi.
Exactly.
All you need.
Because obviously that is a massive homage to the ending of, and my mind is blanking now, Billy Bob Thornton.
The Man Who Wasn't There.
The Man Who Wasn't There.
Which might be my favourite Coen Brothers movie, I'm not sure.
Wow. I'll have to I saw it years ago, and it's obviously due a rewatch.
As we progress throughout this podcast, I'll be talking about it quite a lot.
Excellent. Good. And I think the point of that scene in that movie, we warned you. We're going to be talking about the Coen movies. We warned you. You're like, when are they going to talk about Fargo? We warned you. We warned you.
We did, to be fair. In all fairness, we did.
The point of that is obviously fairly nihilistic. In my interpretation, he sees this UFO hovering in the distance, and then it flies away into the clouds again. And he doesn't tell anyone. He doesn't have some sort of sudden realization, oh, the aliens were behind. It's nothing like that. It's just, that was weird. Anyway, can't do anything about that. Got to get on with my life.
It's kind of the idea of just sort of like being like, wow, the universe is so much bigger than I ever anticipated.
True.
And in that, it is, and it's like in that instance, it's like we're here, and like all I'm thinking about is trying to solve this crime or trying to take over the family business or whatever they're involved with, and then they see that and they're like, wow, none of this actually really means squat in the grand scheme of things. But then obviously, then the next shot is fired, the UFOs run away, and it's just back to basics again. It's, oh, well, better keep going.
Well, yeah, it's what Peggy and Ed said, as they're running away. Ed is like,
just a flying saucer, Ed. We gotta go.
Flying saucer, Ed, come on. He's like,
possibly my favorite quote throughout the entire show.
I mean, Peggy is just such a amazing, such a perfect Fargo character. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. There'll be
we are
about the Blomquists. But yeah, the UFO motif, I think, again, calling back to what we were discussing earlier, the paradoxical nature of things. Goodness, wow, that's a heavy phrase for a
paradoxical nature of things
about a podcast about a TV show. But it's that that nihilistic, depressing thought of, wow, I really don't matter. Things out there are so big and vast. And yet it's awe-inspiring. You go, wow, that's kind of a freeing thought, actually, that if whatever happens to me, it just happens. And there's so much more out there to experience and to learn from and to look at and observe and to never know the answers to. And that's fine, I think. It's scary, absolutely. As an atheist, the concept of dying is the end. That is horrifying. But freeing in a way, I suppose. It makes me appreciate life. It makes me appreciate the things in the moment. Having these little moments of reflection on, wow, this place is bigger than I thought, makes me more attentive on the smaller things. I think that's what the show does. It goes, look at this massive UFO, bright lights hovering down, it's booming, thundering, hovering noise, and then it's gone. And you go, oh, what's left? Oh yeah, I'm solving a crime. I'm trying not to die. I'm trying to rescue a loving couple from the hands of a killer Vietnam vet.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that this show, as well as taking a lot of cues from the Coen Brothers, also takes a lot from David Lynch and Twin Peaks and stuff like that. And I remember listening to David Lynch talking about how his films are to show kind of the horror that lies at the heart of things, but in order to show people the beauty of the mundane.
Oh yeah.
And it's the idea of, like, the warmth of this show is when, the people, they come home and they see their families and they just sit on the sofa and just enjoy a meal together. And they're like, yeah, I had a bit of a bad day. And they're like, oh, have another slice of pie. And it's that kind of attitude of just like life goes on.
Yeah, and that's definitely the most prevalent in season 2 compared to any other season,
Which is probably, again, why it's my favorite. It's the one that's the warmest.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if Peggy can, make tater tots for Ed and talk about buying the butcher shop and just their life and making a family, and the kitchen sink drama of that, there's obviously tension there with those two. Ed is very much set in his traditional ways of, I work, we'll have a kid, we own a business and the house and the car, and that's the way it is, and that's it. That's all I want. And Peggy loves Ed, evidently, but there's something that she disagrees with in that.
Yeah.
And then that's immediately, like a car crash, is then broken by...
it's not like a car crash, it is a car crash.
By an actual car crash, by her bringing home what she thinks is a dead guy on the hood of a car. Who then turns out to, be involved in this massive crime story. That massive thing that then highlights the importance of the smaller things again.
Yes.
Which is why I love season 2, which is obviously why you love it above all others.
Yeah. And I guess also, like, just to quickly mention this as well, like, in a lot of the seasons, you get the one character who is just complete and total evil.
Yeah.
You get your Vargas, you get your Malvos and that. In season 2, even the characters who are clearly meant to be that, they have a rationale, they have a reason,
Yeah, there's a certain shade to them, a sympathetic edge that you go, there's something more to you, something more human, because Malvo is certainly devil-like. Obviously, big theory that Malvo could be the devil himself. And Varga is very much this horrific wolf-like tumor that just comes in and feasts and grows and then, leaves everything to die. And season 2, I think Hansi is perhaps the spiritual successor, even though it's a prequel, to the Malvo kind of character of this unstoppable one-man killing machine. And then
he has pathos.
All about his history in the war, his pathos in the war, and him being a Native American, and the weird relationship he has with the country he lives in and has fought in. He's a war hero, and yet he's a villain, and yet you're sympathetic with him. He wants, he's tired of this life. And that one phrase that breaks down the image of Hansi, or it did for me anyway. I kind of went, God, do I even know this character anymore? What is he? He's such a... Yeah, and again, we'll talk about him in a later episode, so look forward to that.
Absolutely.
And Mike Milligan, of course, being the other...
Who, again, it does represent this kind of chaotic evil, and yet there is still that element of just like, but this is a guy who, is living in a time where the colour of his skin makes, everybody see him as lesser. And so, of course, he has to be overly educated. Of course, he has to be overly masculine.
He has to talk like he's white, I think.
Yeah.
I think we discussed this before. The manner of his speaking is very much, he's picked it up around him in order to survive.
Yes.
And I think there are layers that are pulled back occasionally with a few line reads. Like, go, oh, this is perhaps more like what he's grown up in as a kid with his family, with the Cannons, and that gang and that neighborhood.
That's going to be an interesting episode because obviously we'll have to refer to not only him in season 2, but also his kind of origin story.
Absolutely, yeah. I think with a lot of character, obviously with Lou, he's in season 1 and in season 2, and with Lester being just in season 1, but Martin Freeman comes back for season 2.
He does, yes. That's right.
Episode for one narration for Hansi, and why that's important, why they chose him. So, which I think we'll add into the Lester episode, which will be the next.
That's a good call. That is a good call. Okay.
I think, yeah, I think that's probably the safest option to do.
Cool.
And so, I suppose swiftly move on to our number 1 place now.
Okay.
Which,
well, you know what mine is, and by process of elimination, we know what yours is as well.
Yes, it is, of course, season 3. David Lewis, you are a god.
I mean, yeah. To be fair,
it's certainly the most depressing, the most cold, I think.
Debatable. I would also argue maybe season 4 is also kind of like that to a certain extent.
I think also another really good credit is due for season 2 and season 4 on set dressing and period piece.
Beautiful. The show looks gorgeous.
Every aspect is set in that time period. Every sideburn and popped collar,
yes,
and wood paneling on cars that Americans seem to have. It just is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So credit where credit's due, but the set dressing for season 3, I would say, is the coldest. It's a lot more machine-like, a lot of
fair enough,
and greys and blacks and whites. A lot of talk on technology, I think, more so than any other, both in the sci-fi writing of the future robots and the androids and the spaceships, and then also with Carrie Coon's character. The kind of technophobe, Luddite mentality of I can't use these computers, these laptops, these syncs won't register me as a human being, and Varga with his hacking and his constant monitoring of information, which again really plays into the timepiece of 2010. You know, post 9/11, social media is really ramping up. Data protection is a massive, massive issue all over the world. And that kind of global politics thing is brought into season 3, particularly with Varga and his ever-changing accent and his multilingual skills and his Russian and Asian lackeys that he has, you know.
Yes.
But season 3's, like I think in the same way that season 2 is your favorite, it being the warmest, it being your favorite, I think season 3 is my favorite because it's the coldest. And I don't know what it says about us. I don't know if that plays into our own personal ideologies. You know, religion versus
possibly.
I think the kind of warmness and this energy and this talk of soul, I think, and this warmth within people is quite a big prevalent talking point in religion, I think. And certainly with the more atheistic, scientific realism approach, I think I have on the world. A lot of coldness and a lot of fact. Things are like this because they are made this way. This is how this works, and this is how this works. It just is. It's just how it was made. But Fargo does that and creeps in a subtle warmth, energy, particularly with Carrie Coon at the end.
Gloria
Bergel, what a beautifully written and acted character.
Absolutely. And a character who my first viewing of season 3, I didn't appreciate very much because I just thought she was constantly being sidelined. And it's only at the end you realize that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Of the character.
The whole world seems to be totally foreign and just not even paying attention to her.
Mhm.
And it's just through her own conviction, through her own Fargo, Minnesota mentality of, you know, the night is dark, the night is long, but at the end of every night is the dawn. There is something
Mhm.
better. There are deep fried Snicker bars, you know, tomorrow. Even
In
though
Gilead.
yeah, exactly. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is, you know, and it's not a religious thing. It's not a spiritual thing. It's just a people thing. It's just, you know, the world is full of fact, full of information, full of technology now, full of just cold atmosphere, big corporate overlords seemingly taking over. But there are still people, and those people will still fight, even when they doubt themselves, as Gloria does. But she sticks to her guns, and at the end of the day, she's recognized by that faucet. She does,
Yeah.
you know, she is recognized and picked up. There is something at the end without it having to be some sort of reward, some sort of grand knowledge, you know, some answer to the universal question. At the end of the day, it's just, you know, she has no marriage. Varga may at the end get away. People have died. She may have not got the recognition, but she has a son, and she has deep fried Snicker bars.
Exactly. And I think it also, like, you know, it speaks a lot about the sort of, like, even though these stories are not intrinsically connected too much, there is kind of like a narrative through line, which is kind of like the idea of this sort of slow death of the kind of traditional family values and the growth of sort of individualism and more sort of this kind of economic sort of mindset.
This
It was kind of
capitalist hunger, almost.
yes.
I think the atmosphere of season 3, this capitalistic beast, is its own character, which uses Varga as a vessel, which uses Emmett as a vessel, which uses, you know, almost everyone as some sort of vessel to.
But we see that capitalist force just evolve throughout every single season until it reaches this kind of personification in Varga. And at the same time, you see the kind of opposing force of this kind of, you know, just sort of genuine goodness that's constantly struggling against it. And again, it's this kind of, you know, it's the White Lodge and the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks. It's this immortal struggle of good and evil.
Exactly.
It's God and the devil. It's, you know,
Yeah, I know.
It's epic.
What a show! What a show! And with season 3, acting is immeasurably good.
I mean, every season the acting is
true. That
good,
is true. That is true. And the score by Jeff Russo on every season is superb. But with certain ones of season 3, certain the song choices, you know, moaning and Prison calling Anson and Chuzo.
All right.
What a bop. What a fantastic and totally unheard of for me personally.
Yeah, and then you get Mongolian throat singing, and Noah Hawley doing like his own covers of songs, as well. Basically, the head writer used the show to launch his own music career.
That's been the truest story of all. Noah Hawley has just been using this as a vehicle to become a pop star.
I'm for it. To be honest, I'm surprised that throughout every single season there hasn't been a use of any music from Inside Llewyn Davis, which I've always found very surprising.
Oh, that's a fair point. I mean, season 5 might. We can only theorize now. Might feature more.
Come on, let's do that. Let's theorize. But Jack, what do you think season 5 might bring? Because Noah Hawley said that it's going to be a more contemporary story.
Yeah, I think if they continue this for 10 or 20 seasons, you never know. I mean, based on the pattern now, it seems to go modern period. And so obviously him saying that the next one's more contemporary, probably more modern, then the one after that perhaps more period, but we'll see. And so that's probably going to be closer to today. So the first season is 2006?
Yeah.
Third season is 2010, so the next one, 2014, 15, 16?
Well, I almost think, like, because obviously we probably won't see another season for a while, and I just
Yeah.
remember thinking, like, what on earth would 2020 look like in the Fargo universe?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like, just everybody walking around with the masks, and because this is the ultimate death of Minnesota Nice and Hello Neighbor, is the one where you can't talk to each other. It's a world in which Varga has won, essentially.
And, yeah, absolutely. It's all digital. It's all information. It's all trackable. It's all, well, track and trace. It's all everything is monitored and listened to and sold off for money.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this season will be the coldest, will be the darkest. But I think if it is set within COVID, or if that is even a factor, perhaps it being the darkest on that front, I think at the end will be eventually the brightest towards the end. But I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, because obviously Fargo is such a is barely a presence in season 4. Obviously, with Mayflower, she is from Minnesota. She's definitely the connecting point. And of course, with Mike Milligan, who eventually goes on to go to Minnesota and the events of season 2 happening. Yeah, I'm not sure what will happen in season 5. It'll be wonderful, and I'm excited for it.
Me too.
And certainly now, being older and more aware of what's going on in the news in the world, I think when I watch that, I'll go, oh yeah, I lived that. I went through that. That's me. That's my struggle. That's something I've seen in the news. Oh, I remember back in the day where this happened. I'll be saying, in 30 years' time, when I look back on season 5 of Fargo. Why? What about you? What's your season 5 in your mind?
Oh dear, man. I mean, like I say, I do think it might be this kind of 2020 type thing, because I think it would fit this kind of pattern. I don't know. No, to be honest, I agree with everything you've said. I think it does need to be a season where there is a kind of initial hope of everybody pulling together, and
Definitely.
it might almost be sort of like we start off, and it is this kind of thematically, it's this the evil side has kind of fully taken over now, but it'll end with this kind of at least temporary vanishing of that when everything goes away and they're able to take off their masks once more.
Definitely. I think perhaps the outside evil of that season might be just the world. It might be what's happening with COVID, with history, with politics, with all this constant social media bombardment of negativity, I think. And perhaps maybe season 5 will play off that, because obviously every villain seems to be this, well, not foreign outsider in way of, perhaps a racism.
But an outsider, definitely.
But an outsider coming in, but
perhaps
season 5 will play on that. And perhaps the outsider is the good guy. And obviously, racism has been a big thing in season 4 and touched upon in season 3 and season 2. And certainly today is a massive talking point with the developments in every field, it seems. And I think perhaps it'll turn it on its head that the outside force is good, and this evil that is spread over Fargo or Minnesota or these characters, the evil is in them. It's this solitary xenophobia, maybe.
I mean, we saw that very much in season 4 with Nurse Mayflower, didn't we?
Exactly, and perhaps it's more evolved, I should say, in season 5, of these characters who maybe are not even villains, but they have this mentality of people need to stay away because there's a plague. But also the news is constantly telling you all this and that, and it's us versus them. So I think maybe season 5 will develop the kind of foreign, evil, outsider, intruder mentality, this xenophobia, perhaps. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and it will be something entirely different and just as.
I mean, you never know.
Exactly, you never know. You never know.
Cool.
But excited.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm excited for the rest of this podcast as well. I'm really looking forward to diving into different characters.
Yes. So as we've sort of discussed over, I don't know, these few weeks with this, we're going to be looking at characters per episode, the history of these characters, the reason for them, our own interpretations, and a few other
performances.
Yeah, we'll have a few surprises, I think, in discussion for people listening in, as well as for ourselves. I think there's a lot of things we'll bring up that we haven't even thought of, perhaps, as we have today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I thought this was only going to be 20 minutes. It's been a lot longer.
I just checked the time now, and goodness, this is a hefty boy.
That's good.
Hopefully, there's something usable. Hopefully, people listening to this have enjoyed. I know I have.
Me too.
So I just want to say thank you, Thomas, for this opportunity, for letting me.
Well, thank you, Jack. I couldn't have done it without you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, you're right, of course. You're absolutely right. But I'd like to see you try. No. Yeah, this thing couldn't be possible without you, bud.
Cheers, man.
And so I'm very thankful for this show on that front, and I'm very thankful for you and for anyone else who's going to be listening to this insane, incoherent rambling of two slowly going insane Fargo aficionados. But I am thankful for Fargo.
I'm thankful for Fargo as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this pilot episode, and we will look forward to speaking to you guys pretty soon in the first official feature-length episode.
We'll be making a social media for this podcast.
By Twitter or Facebook page.
At VeryFriendlyPeople. If it's any different, I'll record something at the end of this and add it on to the episode. If I couldn't get Very Friendly People. Yes, so check us out for that, for updates on future episodes coming out. If you have any questions, that's where you can reach out to us. If you have any feedback,
please do.
Yes, absolutely. We'd love to hear feedback. But try and keep it friendly. Very friendly people in this.
Very friendly people
in this community.
Absolutely.
Very friendly people, exactly. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Again.
Yes, you betcha. This show's wonderful music was composed and performed by George Matthew, who you can find on SoundCloud at GeorgieBoy-2. And the incredible artwork is done by artist Dan Rhys, who can be found on Instagram at rhyseri.illustrator. That's at RHYSCERI.illustrator on Instagram. Right. Well, there we go. That's it.
Woo!
That's the end.
So that was the practice run, yeah?